Hey there, Fit Fam. Welcome to the only podcast where we're breaking the mold and rewriting the rules. I'm here to debunk the myths, spill the tea, and serve a hefty dose of reality. No matter where you're at in your journey, we've got something for everybody. So buckle up because we're about to unleash the basics in the most unapologetic way possible. From shedding pounds to embracing your inner badass, I'm here to remind you that skinny is so last season and the basics are anything but boring. So grab your favorite piece of protein and your water bottle and get ready to be empowered, entertained, and educated because being a basics bitch has never looked this good. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Don't Call Me Skinny. Super excited to have you here today. I have a special guest. I'm very excited to dive in with her. Her name is Miss Christina McClurken. I don't know why I said Miss, but that we are just going with it. And she is in a coaching container with me, and I'm just excited to collaborate with her today. We're going to be diving into some interesting topics. I think we might hurt some feelings, which you all know I'm good with, she's good with, and I'm going to go ahead and let her introduce herself and tell her about her story, how she became a coach, and how we got here today. So thanks for joining me today.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I'm so thrilled to be here.
Thrilled
to be here. Yeah. Awesome. A quick little backstory. I'll condense it, as much as I can. I'm talking about 3 decades worth. I am a child of the 80s. I like to say, like most of us, probably, and a lot of your listeners, grew up in diet culture. My mother was always doing some sort of diet in the household, whether it be grapefruit before her meals or Slim Fast or Weight Watchers. And so I was exposed to it and impressionable. I think I was an athlete, so I wasn't very much dieting like in that phase of life. But I did learn some of the behaviors, and then I went to college for physical therapy, getting my master's in that. And I gained the freshman 15 in like the first, 15 minutes or so. And as a female, it's kind of, I just was ballooning and thought, okay, well, it's my college years. And even though I was studying healthcare, I wasn't really big into my health. But once I graduated, I started working in hospitals and rehabs with a lot of people that had like strokes and spinal cord injuries or heart attacks or hip replacements. And I got to see really as a 20-something-year-old girl what was coming down the road for us if we didn't take care of ourselves. Like patients that had past medical histories of every 3-letter abbreviated lifestyle disease, I said cups of pills as like their second breakfast. And I was like, man, I just do not want this to be me. And one of my patients in particular really stood out that she had had a stroke. She was a heavier set woman. I was trying to teach her how to slide from her wheelchair on a board across to a mat just so she could get out of her chair. And she really couldn't move. And she just cried. And she said, Christina, I wish that I only knew to take care of myself the way you guys do now. And it was like a real light bulb moment for me because I was not. Here I was practicing healthcare and I was not practicing it on myself. So I decided, okay, this is it. I don't want to be like that when I get older. I don't want to live off medications and have all this disease. So I decided to get, quote unquote, healthy. But again, as a child of the 80s, to me, that meant, okay, I'm going to diet essentially. So, I did everything. I would say I did Weight Watchers, I did Atkins, and now dating myself, right? And really kind of landed on my Fitness Pal. So plugged my height, weight, and activity level in, and it told me to eat about 1,000 calories a day, which was, really impossible. So I decided, well, I'll try to do 1,200 and, burn 500 on the elliptical every day. So I did that for quite a period of time. And did I lose weight? I sure did. But I lost a lot of other things, one including my period. And I also developed hypothyroidism. So I did not know it at the time, but these were metabolic adaptations that were happening in my body. And they were a sign that I was dieting too much. And I did not know that. And I only wish that I did. So, fast forward to trying to get pregnant. My husband and I couldn't get pregnant because, of course, I had lost my cycle. My thyroid was off. So I had to do fertility treatment to have my kids, which, I always joke and I say dieting cost me about $15,000 and almost cost me a family, which is not really a joke, to be quite honest. It's unfortunate. If I only had known better. And so after my kids, I knew I wanted to show them something different when it came to food. I wanted to break the generational cycle of dieting, and I did not want to pass that down. I also was realizing I loved my job, but I was in sick care. I really wasn't in healthcare, and I wanted to be on the preventative end and really prevent people from being my future patients, And so I started teaching group fitness. I loved fitness. Obviously, physical therapy was my career. But I, again, saw a lot of people that were religiously coming to my classes and were struggling to lose weight and were really frustrated, and they just didn't understand the impact of nutrition. So that led me to wanting to work, with women at a younger age, both fitness and nutrition. But without a business background, I didn't really know how to do that and make it profitable for myself. So I did start coaching with a pretty popular, health and wellness, fitness, weight loss company. And I was very successful with them, and it was a great experience. But in the 8 to 10 years I was doing that, I really noticed big gaps in the space between what was taught and what was needed. And simultaneously went through some struggles with my own family. My sister got diagnosed with stage 4 non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, which, as you can imagine, was obviously awful for her. But she is my best friend, my pseudo twin, I call her. So it was very hard for me. And I was raising 3 little ones, working full time, teaching at a gym. Like, I pretty much lost my shit. I couldn't sleep. I was stressed. So I hired my first real holistic health coach. And it was such an eye-opening experience to me, the real immense impact of sleep and stress on overall health and weight loss. Because obviously at the time, I didn't realize it. My weight, I was struggling to manage it because I was so stressed and because I stopped sleeping. And so as I approached health from a different angle, not only did I feel a lot better and help manage my stress better, but I started sleeping better. My weight started resolving, issues started resolving themselves. So, I just knew I needed to create something of my own that really brought it all together for women, because it just wasn't out there. So I decided to go back, get my functional nutrition certification. I created my own approach to nutrition and overall holistic wellness that I now teach to my clients. And it's been amazing. And so it's how I live my life. It's how I teach people to live their lives. And that's kind of what brought me here.
Yeah, that's awesome. Lots of story here. There's so much. I'm 41, so I'm also an 80s baby, born in 83. And the diet culture, the behavior learning from the parents. My mom was also a Weight Watchers person, except I was probably a lot younger, when she did that. And I don't totally remember. For me personally, it was more or less the learned behaviors of macaroni and cheese, homemade, is a whole meal. And you that's your meal. And there's no boundaries. There's no boundaries with food. It was just eat whatever you want, when you're hungry. It doesn't, there doesn't matter. I'm curious. The first thing I want to dive into, there's so many things. I was literally writing notes. I'm we can talk on this and talk on this. So thank you for sharing your story, because it's really impactful, and it's really important that people understand, especially when it comes to things like hypothyroidism, your inconsistency with your cycle and things like that. They don't just happen. There's a reason that they're happening. And you're talking about how you went from, the kind of the fad dieting and even into mainstream dieting, I'll call it, with the program. And then you went to holistic. How did a holistic coach approach somebody like you who was a fad dieter and say, look, we're just going to focus on your stress? How did you receive that? How did that transform or transpire?
Yeah, what's interesting is because, and probably a lot of people, I knew I was going through a hard time, but it's still in the back of your head when you grow up. I feel like it's in your DNA to be our DNA to be concerned about our weight. So I kind of went to her for both, because she was like me. She also did coach on nutrition. But I will say what's very interesting is I didn't know that correlation, that the nutrition was part C of the equation, right? If stress and sleep were not managed and in place, what we did with nutrition wasn't going to make a difference anyway. So she did help guide me with nutrition. But to be honest, because I was someone who I needed some learning, let's just say unlearning of what I thought I knew. Yeah. But what she really had to hold me accountable for was the sleep and stress. And I see this so often with my clients. It's well, I'm doing all the right things. Because when I say I'm doing all the right things, I was only paying attention, I'm eating the right foods. And because I do, I love healthy foods. I love vegetables. I also love chocolate, but I actually enjoy eating well. I enjoy exercising. So that is not what she had to hold me accountable for. She actually had to tell me, you need to exercise a little less. And you need to actually, I'm going to hold you accountable for, not did you eat your protein today, but what did you do for stress management today? Yeah. When was the last time you took an Epsom salt bath, right? And what are you doing at night before bed? And those were things that to me was kind of but let's talk about my food first, right? I was open to it. I just think I did not understand the impact and why that's where she was like focusing, I didn't, and where I needed the most accountability for. I think until you walk through that, right, it's really hard to know that those things play such a pivotal role, and you frequently need someone to make you stop and pay attention to that. And I say that from, the reason I had kind of thought this approach was, like I said, the stress of my sister going through her illness. And I truly believe stress is what caused her cancer, not only once, but twice. And so it kind of was watching someone go through it who would maybe have gotten even further than the issues that I had. It was just a real eye opener that I needed a coach, and my coach was very understanding and gentle, and not like, it wasn't like boot campy, like, hey, you got to do this. It's like, let me actually like teach you about why these things are important. And then as you see it transpire, you're going to be really understanding it to a whole nother level.
Yeah. So it just takes me back to I onboarded a client the other day, like Monday, yesterday. And she has a lot going on at home life. She has a lot going on at her work. And I was like, hey, I think our first step is to let's focus on our sleep, because when I mentioned we can build a stress toolbox and we can use the last thing, she's like, I don't even know what that is. Mm-hmm. Exactly. So let's educate a little bit there before we start doing that. And let's work on our sleep, right? Because these are the things that if we your sleep is going to affect your cravings. It's going to affect how much food you desire to consume. It's going to affect your mood, your energy level. It's going to affect so many things that play a role into all the things that you're trying to change that just quote unquote aren't working, right? I'm broken. I can't be fixed. And it's like, did you sleep more than 4.5 hours?
Yeah.
And nobody wants to have that conversation. And so when I, work with somebody, for me, or talking about a gentle approach, it's like, I come across pretty brash. I'm not gonna lie. You listen to my podcast and stuff, but today I left a 3.5 minute voice note in my community that said, hey, some of us are sick. Some of us are still trying to get back into routine. Pick one thing this week that you really want to focus on and pay attention to, and let that be the thing that you focus and pay attention. That we don't have to conquer the whole world today. Yeah. It's not necessary. And yet we think that we do all the time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think this is a really opportune time to talk about it, because I saw it across the board, and you can tell me how many of your clients were sick, belly bugs, colds, bronchitis over the holidays. And it's not a coincidence that that's the most stressful time of year. Yep. And I do truly feel that sometimes I call it the universal smackdown. Sometimes you won't stop, so the universe will give you something, put it in your way to force you to stop. But again, a lot of people aren't getting, unless you're working with a coach aren't getting that message. Damn it, I keep getting sick. And they'll start to feel a little better. They start going back to the gym, and it's you're not ready yet. You didn't give your body time to heal. So, and I will say too, it's funny. My clients call me your healthy bestie. It's my website, because I'm kind of that person that is, one of my clients called me you're kind of a combination of fairy godmother and homie don't play that. Because it's I will be your biggest supporter. I will explain, but at the same time, I'm also going to tell you what you need to hear that might not be what you want to hear. And that's really what best friends are for, right? Just someone to tell you here's the truth,
And sometimes that's hard to hear. Sometimes we have to, so, that was a reminder. I'm yesterday when I onboarded her, I'm just a reminder, be open to doing things a little bit differently, be open to things that we might try and it might not work. Just be open to I'm not here to be your best friend, as far as I'm not going to tell you all the great things. And I'm really not here to be your mom, because moms will just they'll tell you all the great things about you, or grandma maybe. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I'm going to tell you it is, but I'm going to do it in a very kind, loving way, because I care about you, really, at the end of the day.
Yeah, I think some people call it tough love. I just call it love, because really, you came to me to help you meet your goals. And so I'm going to help you meet your goals. And some of it is going to feel great for you, and some of it's going to challenge you a little bit. And that's really what I feel and you probably feel too. If you don't get people towards their goals, you're not as successful. It's I want you to have the outcome you want. So I'm going to tell you what's required of it, and you lean in, and we do that together, stepping through some discomfort and celebrating wins together, right? Or maybe if people are not ready to do what they actually need to do, right? That's usually where it becomes a challenge for people to get results. It's more of the mental barrier always, and that's normal, that it just pulls you back to that comfort of what you know. But the comfort of what you know typically is why you're stuck. And so then it's kind of it's worth it to step through a little discomfort to get a different result.
Yeah. And It's not fun as a coach, even sometimes they have to be I don't want to call it the bad guy, but just the guy that has to tell you like, hey, like maybe it's because we're having 14 alcoholic drinks a week that we're not actually getting the result that we want. Like, how can we together collectively come up with a plan for that so you can still enjoy yourself, but also like get the result that you want? You know, it's like, it's not always the fun guy, but it's like, it's also fun when you realize and you start to get your client to move through that uncomfortability. And it's like, they can finally see on the other side, like, oh, this is what she's doing this for. This is why I came to her. Oh, okay. Now it makes sense.
Right. And I think too, when it comes to things like, because I love my desserts. Like, I'm not a big drinker, but I love my desserts, where some people love their nightly wine. And I always tell people, like, these are what I call sometimes foods, right? Or sometimes things. And so it's dose dependent, right? Like, maybe, a lot of people are all or nothing, right? I'm either going to drink or I'm going to go dry January. It's like, well, it's fine for January, but what about the in between? And so I always tell people, like, let's look back at your 7 days of your tracking. Like, how many days did you have? If you're frustrated about the progress, because that's typically how the conversation starts, well, let's look back. How many days did you have, like, a sometimes food, whether it be a drink or, a dessert or fast food or something? And if you're looking back and it's 6 out of 7 days, it very well could be that's just the reason you're not making progress. So why don't we cut it back to 2 days and see how you do? And then people finally can realize that they can have that balance, right? And it doesn't come from a place where foods are on limits or off limits, because we all know that is a very temporary solution. But then it comes from a place of, I like to make my clients feel very empowered in their choices. Like, I'm actually choosing to say no to this today because I have these goals that I'm working towards. And I know when I'm in maintenance, then maybe 3 to 4 days a week will work. But right now I'm focusing on loss. And so I'm going to just tone it down a little bit by choice, because now I recognize that, like, when I do that, there's my progress that I've been looking for. And it's not as complicated as we think.
Yeah. I always say it's so much more powerful when you can say, I don't want that, not because I can't have it, but because I'm choosing to not have it. And it's something you touched on at the very beginning is when you were talking about, like, the morality of food. Food is good. Food is bad. It's something that I talk about a lot, is food relationship. What do you notice with your clients? Are you noticing that the all or nothing, the this is bad, that is good, clean eating is good, and everything else is bad? Or how does that look in your world?
That's actually, that's a question I ask my clients on our calls before they even decide. I'm like, talking about your relationship with food, how would you describe it? The most common answer, I think this is back to, like, Facebook, is like, it's complicated. Remember when that was like relationship status? It's like, for everybody it is, because I have some clients who, like, love to eat. They're like, it's just a problem. I love to eat. I'm like, I love to eat, right? You should love to eat. So if that's not the problem, right? And I think it is. It's the learned, like, good or bad, because I always say, like, not all food is nutritionally equal, but it's all morally equal. So when we say the word bad or I cheated, I'm like, there's nowhere in the English language that cheat has a positive connotation, right? Like, whether it be at school or in a relationship. So you saying you cheated is just immediately putting a negative connotation on yourself. And I was like, positive results never came from a negative mindset. So if but I understand where that comes from, because it comes from every diet that that foods were off limits. So a lot of people have a hard time understanding that I always say, there's nothing off limits in my program. I will not tell you can't have something, but I will change the way you desire it, right? And that is the ultimate goal, because then like, true change has happened. So we actually need to remove the good and the bad, or the approved and the not, and the restriction on everything. Because when it becomes readily available, it's way less likely that you're going to feast or famine it, like, when it's in front of you. I always say, like, no food is now or never. Like, we live in America. If you pass on a donut in the break room, you can drive by Dunkies and get 5 on your way home, right? So, so I think I see a lot of that. I see a lot of the all or nothing, where people have come from either all on or all off. And again, that is learned from the fact that the diets in the past that you've done have told you, it's like, you're in it, and if we ever feel like we're doing that, we're on track or off track, then you need a new track, right? You need a track that allows you to have a glass of wine and a piece of chocolate and a birthday cake and holidays, right? Because otherwise, if you just come off the holidays and decided to do something in January that wouldn't have worked over the holidays, guess what? It's not going to work next time the holidays come, right? So let's find the happy medium.
Yeah, I often talk the same thing, cheat meals. I get that question a lot. Am I allowed to have a cheat meal? I'm like, actually, I don't tell you what to eat. Like, we shift, we adjust, we educate, we do all those things, but there's no food, if you like it and enjoy it, that you're not allowed to have. because I did an entire podcast on cheat meals because I'm like, cheating reminds me of my ex-husband, right? Like you said, nowhere in the history of time in the definition is cheat positive. There's nothing. You cheat death, you cheat all this. There's nothing great about this word. So it's like, we need to, like, language matters. Language really matters. So kind of talking about the good food and the bad food. You're a mom. I'm also a mom. I have 3 kids. How do you handle food in your home? We kind of briefly talked about like mac and cheese was a whole meal. There were no boundaries in my home. How do you handle your food in the household?
Yeah. I love that question. So same way I do with my clients, which is what makes it beautiful, because I have a lot of mom clients that are, one of their goals is to teach their kids. But if you go on another diet, you're not gonna be able to teach your kids, right? Like, so it does really matter. And I want to go back to the fact that, like, I grew up in a household that was the same thing. I was Italian, pasta for dinner every night.
Scoop
like
carbs with carbs.
Yeah, like pasta, maybe some chicken, but scoop some bread with it, right? Like, so I did not, a lot of people are like, well, I never learned this. I'm like, listen, I didn't either. So it starts with the fact that I think this generation is different. We are now developing a growth mindset, right? Which is that understanding that we can change, where I think our parents, which is why we're seeing our mom, they're not changing as much. It's just a different culture of mindset. But I grew up squirting Cheese Whiz into my mouth. I grew up like Pop-Tarts for breakfast, or toaster strudels, or Oreo O's, like, with my cereal, you know? So I did not know this stuff right from the beginning. So I think the first thing is, like, taking responsibility that if you are, obviously for yourself, but also if you're a mom, you are responsible for your kids. You're responsible for making sure they buckle their seatbelt in the car. You're responsible for teaching them about nutrition. And if you don't know yourself, you're responsible for learning, right? But again, I say that with caution, because where are you learning it from and what are you learning? So I teach my clients the same way I teach my kids, so that they can also teach their kids. And I truly use that word, like, sometimes foods, right? So anytime foods are things that are nourishing for us, right? Like any whole food, like fruits, vegetables, good proteins, like, again, whole food carbohydrates, those you can have anytime, right? But sometimes foods, when they say, like, can we have ice cream, or can we have Oreos? I'm like, they know that those are sometimes foods. So are we going to have them all the time? No, but can we have them sometimes? Absolutely. And if it's a night they're asking for ice cream and they have ice cream, the next day they might ask again. I'm like, no, because that's a sometimes food, and we just had it last night, so maybe we'll have it later on in the week, right? So that's literally how I teach them. When my kids are all in sports, like, I love athletic family. So I try to teach them about what they need to nourish themselves and stay full. Like, of course, my kids, same thing. They love their what do you want for dinner? Pasta every night. That's great. That's your carbohydrate. We also will have a protein and a veggie with it. What would you like? So that way I allow them to pick it, right? Because it's fine that their first choice is carbohydrate. I mean, that's probably most of us as adults too. But so I'm teaching them how to balance their plates the same way I teach my clients. And I'll explain to them, like, that pasta is so delicious, but that's why you'll find you're hungry in an hour, because they'll notice that, like, an hour later, they're still hungry. I said, if we can put some protein with it, it will help you stay full. So I literally teach my kids about nutrition the same way that I teach my clients, and I use the same verbiage so that it's universal, because I want them to grow up with this understanding. And there are boundaries I set, obviously, around the frequency of the sometimes foods, but also like the timing of meals and eating, because my kids, of course, they like to eat right up till the minute they go to bed. So I have, like, 8 o'clock, lights out, kitchen's closed kind of thing. And that's just it. And that way, because I think adults should do that too, right? We need to put a boundary on it for ourselves. So there's a time, whatever time that is, that works for you, where it's like, kitchen's closed, like, and then it's just not even an option. And then I don't have to fight them for asking, can I have something? Like, no, kitchen's closed,
Yeah, we have kind of very similar. One thing that I never really was taught is it's okay to have one of something. Like, it's okay to eat like 2 or 3 Oreos, and then you put the pack. It's like, no, if you open the Oreos, and back in the day, they only came in like the long sleeves.
Long sleeves.
Yeah. So it's like, you just eat all the Oreos. They'll go stale. Like, there's so many reasons why you would have to do that. Right. So a lot of times, depending on the food, then it's a 1 time a day food, right? So it's like, okay, if you already had a fig bar, right, then we don't need another fig bar, okay? So it's like, or if you already had a protein bar, we should probably have a whole source of some kind of, like, find some, there's sausage in there's turkey meatballs you can eat, like, there's some kind of something that you can go for, leftover chicken, whatever it is. But I do this very same thing. Recently, I've noticed, over break. So my son is a swimmer, and they were having 3-hour practices in high school over break, very intense practices. And I was noticing at about 9 o'clock, right before he'd go to bed, he's like, man, I'm really hungry. I said, look, I said, we have to start this process a little sooner. So if you're on your video game, you need to be conscious and aware of what time you're going to bed before you consume your food, solely just because you're putting energy into your body and now you're trying to go to bed, right? And you have cycles. You have a sleep cycle. You have a blood sugar cycle. You have a cortisol cycle. And all of those are going to run off of the energy that you're putting in your body right now. It's not about, it's a terrible thing to eat food, but it's like you have to understand why I want you to start paying a little bit more attention to this. So last night it happened again. And I was like, Clayton, I told you, like, if you're going to have, and you're hungry, but then there's also this like, but I don't want him to be hungry because he's going to get up and he has morning practice or he has morning lift. And then he's got to like, so there's just like weird balance, but it's not about him doing it perfectly. It's about him understanding and learning. And then same with clients. It's like, you might not get it the first time. You might not get it the fourth time. You might not get it the 10th time, but maybe on the 11th, you're going to get it.
Yeah. And I think that's why I'm so passionate about, like I said, I am with you. I always tell people, I don't tell you what to eat. I teach you how to eat. Like, it's kind of that give a man a fish, he eats once, teach a man a fish, he eats for life. So I'm like, I will help you build your meal plan, but we're going to do it based off your schedule, your food preferences, like what you like. Like, I'll help you come up with the ideas, but like, it's going to be around your input, because otherwise I could give you a meal plan and you're only going to eat it till you don't feel like freaking eating that anymore. And then you still have no idea what to do. So that's a disservice if any coach is doing that for you.
Yep.
But likewise, like you said, when people understand the reason behind why, it makes it so much easier to make that decision versus just being told to, right? So, a lot of people have been told no eating after 7. So they're like, but then there's sometimes I'm like, well, first of all, it's not a hard blanket rule. I said, I personally like you to stop 2 hours before bed, right? 2 to 3 hours, so it doesn't impact your sleep. But if you're somebody that goes to bed at 11 and you need a snack at 9, so be it, right? And then I like you to go about 12 hours every night before you have something again. Again, blood sugar balance, gut rest, digestion, all that. So if you eat at 9 at night, then you can eat breakfast at 9 in the morning, right? It doesn't have to be at 5 a.m. So it's like, there's so many nuances and individual, like there's no one size fits all. And I think that's the biggest problem. We're all out there looking for that. But if you truly can pair up with a coach in a program that will teach you these things, like why we want to stop eating a couple hours before bed, it's just, why you want to actually get off your phone a little bit before bed, because it's going to, you're complaining about being tired. Well, this is disrupting your sleep. The food next to bed is disrupting your sleep. The phone next to bed is disrupting your sleep. So if we can give that knowledge that, oh, okay, so it's not like a rule follow because I said so, it doesn't work on our kids and it doesn't work on an adult, right?
Nope.
No one's going to do it just because I said so, or if they do, very short-lived. So I'm really passionate, like you said, about kind of teaching my kids and my clients the understanding as the why behind what we're doing, so that my goal is not that they need me forever. My goal is that they know how to do this after. And it's not just because they were working with me at the time. So that's a huge component that I think is missing in so many programs.
Yeah, I agree. We talk a lot, even at dinner time, we kind of try to I don't know exactly how old your kids are. My kids are 16, 15, and 12. And so we kind of make it a game as to is this a protein? Is this a carb? Is it a fat? Is it a carb fat? Is it a protein fat? Is it a carb, carb protein? Like, how does this work? And how do you know? And how do you read a label? Like, these are all things that I am currently teaching my kids right now so that they understand, because these are things that I didn't know. And it's what kept me stuck in a cycle for 32 years where I found myself at 250 pounds. It's like, this is exactly.
They should be taught in school.
Oh, God.
They don't need to know cursive. They need to know. I have a funny story about that because one of my kids, I don't know how, my kids right now, my oldest is 13. I have twin 10-year-olds.
Okay.
And thanks to fertility. But
money paid off. That money paid off.
Yeah. We got BOGO.
Twofer.
So I distinctly remember one of my kids was young enough to be in, I think, like the sitting part of the grocery cart. And we were checking out, and you know how there's like codes for the produce. I mean, I grew up working in a grocery store too. I could still tell you what they all are, but I had a portobello mushroom, right? And the guy checking me out was probably like a teenage kid. And he's like, what is this? And my kids are like, that's a mushroom, like this. So yeah, I mean, I definitely, because I teach them, they're always asking, well, does this have protein in it? Does that have protein in it? And so, we may not do it at mealtime, but they're always inquisitive about that because they know they're going to need a protein source. So they're like, is this, is that? And then, my son did look at his Gatorade bottle the other day and, this has 150 calories. What's a calorie? And I said, well, calories is energy, right? So there are certain calories that are going to give you better lasting energy. And there's certain ones, like that Gatorade that might give you some quick energy. And then because, it's going to pass. So they're learning as they go, which is, like you said, in application is so important. You're not going to like sit your kids down probably and have like a, science class lesson on it. Although, not going to lie, I think it would be more appropriate if we were doing that in school. But
yes.
Like any kid, if we learn in application, and then I do point out, like, if they're hungry, like because they did just have maybe crackers for their snack, I'm like, well, again, if we pick a protein and put it with it, like you're going to be way more full. So I agree with you. It's kind of like in context, in ways that they can understand for their age is super important.
Yeah. Yeah. I will say my kids had health class last year. And they do learn a little bit about protein, carbs, and fats and those kinds of things. Or maybe it was science. Maybe it was biology. I'm not even sure. But I will say some of the education, they come home, they're like, Mom, can you believe what they said at school?
Well, that's
today?
what I was going to say. I would be very cautious of who's teaching that, right? Because what are they taught? And what biases are they bringing in from their history? So, but at least I honestly think if we could teach kids things about nutrition and banking and saving money, like finances, that would be so much more practical than a lot of the stuff.
Yeah.
No disrespect to teachers. You're amazing, like what you do, but I think just the context of what is taught in schools, we could do a lot more life skills for sure. And nutrition and wellness being one of them.
I completely agree. My 12-year-old is actually in a class right now called Money Matters, and he's one of two seventh graders in. So then he was like talking about stocks and talking about bank accounts and talking about all this stuff. And I was like, okay, all right. Again, like, hey, maybe it's not like 100% accurate, but at least you're learning terminology and language and things that
they can come home and ask you questions about it. So you can answer.
Correct. Yeah. So it's really kind of cool to see. Okay. So let's make a shift because I want to talk a little bit about some of the commonalities that a lot of women come to us. One of those commonalities particularly is I'm eating so little food and I'm not losing weight. Can we talk about that?
Yeah, we absolutely can. And one of my favorite topics, and I'm sure we both could blog forever about this. So a couple things. Sometimes women are coming and are truly eating a little food, right? And when that's the case, typically it's kind of like I was, right? You've been under eating for so long. Our bodies are built for survival. They don't care about your six-pack. Your metabolism does not give a shit if you can see your abs or whatever, So a lot of people think that it's just calories in, calories out. Then people who are not eating enough could whittle away to 0 pounds. That does not happen. We have protective mechanisms in our body to keep ourselves alive. So if you think back to back on our ancestors, right? There were times where food was not that readily available, like over the winter when they couldn't hunt. But guess what? They didn't die, right? They held on to their body fat to survive. So when you are truly under eating for a length of time, your body is saying, okay, this is a risk of a famine. There's not enough coming in. So I always ask my clients, would it make sense that your body would burn your extra fat stores? It wouldn't. And then as a female, we have that second layer of protective mechanism because we are the childbearing species. So again, your metabolism doesn't give a shit if you want to have a kid or not. It's still a female metabolism protecting you. So if you were truly eating 1,200 calories, which is not even enough to sustain you, would it be a safe environment to have a kid? No, it wouldn't. So is your body going to let go of your stored fat? No, because just in case you get pregnant, it wants to have it there. So I think, again, it's like a learning piece of understanding. So there's some people that are truly under eating. And then if they're not losing weight, what happens is, of course, their metabolism has adapted. It said, okay, if I'm only getting 1,200 calories in, I'm going to change what I put out to match that 1,200, which is why things happen like happened to me, because it has to pull from energy expensive systems in your body. It will pull energy from your immune system. So you'll start to notice that you get sick more, right? And then it will pull from things like your reproductive system, your thyroid, all of that stuff, because those are energy expensive. Like the food that we need, the energy that we need is not just to get a workout in and move about our day. It's for your body to function. And so truly, if you're eating 1,200 and you're not losing weight, it's just because that's your, what we call adapted maintenance, right? And then what we would want to do is say, okay, what would be your true maintenance is up here. And then we're slowly and incrementally going to build you up there to pull that stress off your body, give it what it needs. And then we can talk about weight loss. But some people think they're not eating that much because they're not eating a lot of volume of food, right? And this is, I think, the fault of portion control, right? Because a lot of people think diet is just, I just need to watch my portions. But why do most people quit a diet? Because they get hungry. Nobody wants to freaking be hungry, right? So what you need to be taught is how to eat to stay full. And simply shrinking your portions is not going to do that. So you could be eating foods that don't have a lot of volume in your stomach, like nuts, like using a lot of oils, like, and I think this popular craze of like, and fats are healthy and we do need them. But if we're going that route and maybe, people are going carnivore and keep like very low fiber, you're not going to have a lot to fill you. So you're eating a lot of calories. It's just that it's small and it's not turning off your hunger hormones, right? So we have a lot of control over our hunger hormones, which people don't tend to understand. The things that turn off your hunger hormones are fiber and protein and your water. So we can actually eat more when we're eating more of the right things. I'll have some clients that we are maybe in this process of reversing, right? Like building them back up. And they're like, I have never eaten this much food. I'm like, yeah, but go ahead and I don't track calories all the time with my clients. So I'm like, go ahead and plug your numbers in. They're like, how is this only 1,400 calories? I can't even imagine eating more. It's like, because when you're eating to stay full and you're eating the right things, you need to eat more of the right things, not just less of everything, right? So I think there's two routes. There's people that are truly under eating, and there's two people that are overeating calories, but maybe just they're not full. And so they're not understanding why they're not losing weight for as little as they're eating. But calorically, it might be, maintenance calories.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to be in a calorie deficit, quote unquote, to lose weight. It's just a matter of how steep is that deficit and how long can you maintain that deficit. It's like if you're eating that 1,200 calories and you're not losing weight, you have to go lower and then lower and then lower. And 700 calories, which is some of these fad diets are having people eat. It's like, no wonder why you're losing weight. Or you do a carnivore. Well, you're not eating carbs anymore. So you're losing a lot of water weight. You're not putting any really water weight into your body except for the water that you're drinking and whatever water's in the meat that you're eating.
You can't poop. Like, I can't even tell you how these people are like, yeah, there's a thing to be said about some fiber, right? Like, I mean, yeah, I know. And then, the functional nutritionist in me goes so far deeper because a lot of, hormones is such a catchy term, but we get rid of a lot of our estrogen through our bowels. So if we're doing a diet that we don't have fiber and we're not going to the bathroom, you're going to throw your hormones off with stuff like that. And, and I think some of these popular ones like Optavia or whatever, 800 calories, like they know you respond to that dopamine hit of seeing the scale go down. But guess what? You're losing muscle. So if you're not eating, yes, you need a deficit, right? But that is so the tiniest little bit of the equation. Correct. Because like we've talked about, whether or not you can sustain that deficit is going to depend on, are you full, right? Are you starving? Because that's not going to work, right? Your body will increase food seeking behavior. So it goes into what you're eating, the quality, the balance, if how you're, again, sleeping and managing your stress, because that stuff affects your hunger. So it's not just about the deficit itself. And then knowing that your body adapts. So yeah, if you're maintaining your weight at 1,200 calories, that simply is not a deficit for you, right? So that means your body's adapted to that maintenance. So it is. There's just so much to it. And those super low calorie ones where you're going to lose muscle, especially because there's no attention to eating protein and you can't even exercise on those programs, right? They're telling you not to. So if you're losing your muscle, you are in effect slowing your metabolism permanently, right? Because muscle is like your furnace. It's while we're sitting here talking, it's burning for us. Yeah. So the more you eat, the harder it is to then maintain that loss, and you're going to rebound, and then you're going to be, I hate to use the word fatter as because people think big in size, but I mean your body fat percentage, right, is going to be higher. Your muscle is going to be lower, and then you're just going to look like fluffy, like not even how you want to look at that weight, right?
Yeah. I don't know about you, but everybody wants to be toned. And it's like, well, that requires muscle. So, and I always say nutrition will be the size of your body, but the muscle will be the shape. Training is what kind of shapes your body. And the nutrition portion is like, so if you just lose weight and you're losing muscle and you're losing all sorts of other things, you're just going to look like a smaller version of what you look like at 200 pounds at 150 pounds. There's no difference really.
Yeah. And I think also like, a lot of people aren't realizing that, oh crap, what was I just going to say? I was going to say something based off what you just said about the, determining like what kind of, weight you are losing and that toned look. And I think a lot of people don't realize too, like you actually have to go through a phase of building that muscle, right? Because there's very few people that can build muscle and burn fat at the same time. Like your body's not designed to do that. Because if you're building muscle, you need to be eating in a surplus to build new tissue, right? And so that phase has to happen first, and then you can kind of try to skim off the fat that's on top. What a lot of people don't want to do, like you said, because they don't want to see that scale go up, they don't want to do that. But then you truly do have to have a super low body fat percentage to even see the muscles, which is why you feel so restricted and you can only eat so much, right? So the whole goal of putting muscle on your frame is to have more freedom with food. You can eat more carbohydrates because your muscles use it, right? You look differently, you can eat differently. So it is, I think I see a lot of women who, I don't know what I was going to say, aren't matching the nutrition with the workouts, right? Because some people are significantly under eating. They're not eating protein, but then they're going to even lift weights because weights are good, right? I say that in air quotes, but it has to be matched, right? Because if you're lifting weights, but you're under eating protein, you're actually just going to burn through your muscle. It's not even building it. So a lot of people, it's like exercise good, right? Like, and they just think no matter what, but if you're not sleeping, if you're super stressed, if you're not eating enough, that exercise is actually working against you. So I frequently, my clients will have to say, hold off on that. We need to build your nutrition up so that you can get the result from the exercise that you want.
Yeah. People always ask, what's the best fat burner? I love that question. I'm like, muscle and protein. Like, that's the best thing you can do that's about it. Like, any other supplement that they're going to try to sell you is bullshit. So just go spend that money on some chicken or something or whatever other kind of protein.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get it. We're in Amazon Prime society that we all want our results yesterday. So if we can bottle it up in a pill or something, it seems appealing. But don't even get me started on supplements. It's like a whole nother thing. But yeah, I think it's like we have to understand that the shortcut is the long way. Like the slow, steady is the work. That's the shortcut, really.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to touch on, I know this is something I come in, happens a lot with majority of my clients are hunger cues in general. We don't understand them. We don't know we don't even understand that they are a hormone. Like when people say, oh, my hormones are messed up, they don't even realize that their hunger cues are actual hormones. And can we also talk about, I want to touch on to like fixing hormones, or balancing them. I think these words are getting a little bit like, I don't know, maybe I'm getting into semantics a little bit, but it's like, we can't really balance or fix them, but we can manage them and make them function appropriately. Can we talk about this?
I like to use the word like optimize, right?
Okay, perfect.
We need to like optimize our function. And a lot of people, like you said, when a lot of women mostly say my hormones are off, they think estrogen, progesterone, right? Like they think they're sex hormones, because that's all they really know of hormones. But when it comes to estrogen and progesterone, they are greatly controlled by insulin and cortisol, right? So we actually have to manage those first. And that is with stress management, blood sugar balance, proper nutrition, proper sleep, movement. So a lot of people don't understand that when we need to, and I'll just say the word balance, because like that's kind of what people are using, right? We need to focus on like a top-down approach, like what actually is it's kind of like a pyramid. Like at the base of the pyramid needs to happen first, and then it will just flow up, or maybe you want to visualize it opposite down. Estrogen and progesterone are not the ones that are primarily in control, right? Insulin and cortisol are, and they will affect estrogen and progesterone. Now, granted, there are shifts that happen as we get into perimenopause, right? And menopause that will cause automatic changes in estrogen and progesterone. That's a whole nother podcast. But I think for the majority of the people saying my hormones are off, right? And they're wondering why they can't lose weight. If you think your hormones are off, you have to look at, am I sleeping 7+ hours a night? Am I managing my stress, right? Or am I like in survival mode all day long? You know, how is my blood sugar balanced, right? All of those sort of things, because that is the key. Lifestyle factors control your hormones, and a lot of people just do not make that connection. And so you can start feeling very much better. And I always tell people, like the other stuff, we like to, if lifestyle isn't managed, we don't even want to talk about any sort of like supplementation or hormone replacement, because you want to kind of pull back and weed out what you can manage through your own behaviors, and then see what's left that, yes, might require some supplementation or something like that, because I do use supplementation, but it's very strategic. And never would I give someone a supplement if their lifestyle factor is not in line to what we're trying to do. So yeah, I think like the hormonal shifts with estrogen and progesterone that come with perimenopause, we can definitely improve the symptoms of like the hot flashes and the cravings and that sort of stuff with our lifestyle behaviors. But people, yes, need to understand that those two are really more controlled when and in line and normalized when insulin and cortisol are. And that all comes from the stuff that we've been talking about.
Yeah. And I think too, like right now, cortisol is like huge. Like everything is, you can't lose weight because you have a high cortisol, and you have belly fat because you have a high cortisol. And I think people don't understand cortisol is supposed to elevate at moments. That is its job. It's doing what it's supposed to. Can you explain a little bit about that? Because that is a little beyond my scope. I'm not gonna lie.
I'd love to explain that. Yeah. So cortisol, essentially, yes, it is it's a good thing. We would die if we did not have cortisol. So let's just say that. It is our stress hormone, which is what you hear. So a couple of things. First of all, it's highest in the morning. That's what wakes us up. We want it to be high. Otherwise, we would not be waking up, right? So the normal curve is it's high, and then it should start to tail off around 8 or 9 a.m. So from a lifestyle standpoint, I always tell people that's when you want to have your coffee, right? If you're going to do caffeine, do it around like 8 or 9 a.m. when that cortisol starts to come down. Because what most people are doing is the cortisol is high in the morning naturally, and then they're skipping breakfast, which is a stress. They're drinking caffeine, which is a stress. Maybe they're working out, which is a stress. Then they go to work and get their kids out the door. It's like stress, 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 stress. And that's when you end up with that chronically high cortisol. So I kind of say cortisol is like, it's like a house guest, right? And all of a sudden it becomes like this one that is overstayed their welcome. It's like constant. So it should come down in morning. You do have a little peak again, like in the middle of the day, and then it should come down at night. And that's when melatonin rises. So cortisol and melatonin kind of have, I know no one can see what I'm doing here, but like an inverse, I'm Italian, an inverse relationship. So cortisol should come down at night where melatonin should rise. So there's another area of the day where people are feeling like, I'm tired, but I'm wired. Like I'm exhausted, but I cannot go to sleep. And that means your cortisol is high at night, which is a dysregulated rhythm, right? Sometimes we get a 3 or 4 a.m. wake up, and that's also a dysregulated cortisol. If you're constantly waking up like 3 a.m., that typically means your cortisol is just rising a little too early. So we need to actually shift into things that will keep that cortisol curve normal. And yeah, it's going to also respond in acute stress. Like, picture yourself about to get sideswiped, like your palms get sweaty, like adrenaline rushes, like that's happening, but then it should calm down when the stress goes away. And that's what's not happening is people are just stressed all the time. Which is why we need to, use stress management techniques that are realistic. Like when I say stress management, I really mean nervous system regulation, like pulling us out of that fight or flight, putting us into that parasympathetic, that rest and digest. And the more we can do that throughout the day, we'll start to regulate those cortisol rhythms. Things like timing of natural light, timing of caffeine, timing of food. Like you said, it's not circadian rhythm is so your digestion, we all have it. So it's, again, all comes back to lifestyle things when you want to actually balance your cortisol. But, the other thing as a functional practitioner, people should know is that there's some people that actually have too low of cortisol, right? You're to the point of adrenal fatigue, you might hear. And that's actually not good either, right? When you have like none. And so some people have worked, to the point of they're stressed, they've worked out a lot, they're under eating, like they are at burnout phase. And then they actually don't have enough. So it's not always too much. Sometimes it's not enough if you're to the point of that like adrenal fatigue kind of state. So this is where it's really important to work with somebody who understands what's going on with your body, because you might, be consuming, if I just say free information is free for a reason, right? You might be consuming all this amazing information out there, but what you need is someone to weed it out and say that applies to you or that doesn't,
Well, I think that's a really good point. In anything that you're consuming on social media, it might not apply to you. Like you have to understand what you can take from it or what you need to leave from it and then move on and not say this person said I have high cortisol, so I must have high cortisol and now I need this gummy.
Yeah. And we need nothing in gummy form, I will tell you. That's just like all these people with supplements and gummies. But yeah, I think that is truly it. And I think if there's a best use of coaching, it is to quiet the noise, right? And to weed out like what applies to me and what do I not need to pay attention to? Because most of the time people are just toggling between things because it's so much information and you end up doing nothing, that analysis paralysis. And it's like when you can have someone very clear say you do not need to pay attention to that, it makes life so much easier when you just know what to do. And then you don't have to be distracted by all of the other bells and whistles, the shiny object syndrome, like I say. My clients are like, no, like this January, I actually asked them yesterday, what's different about this year than last year? It's like this year I stepped on and my scale might be up a little, but I'm not looking for the next thing. I'm just like, let me get back to what I was doing right before, and that is a huge mindset shift. And that is to not have to worry about all of that diet noise out there is the most freeing thing that you can have. Mm-hmm. And I think having some guidance and support can help you find that.
Yeah. I think sometimes it's more important, the things that you don't need to pay attention to than the things that you do, because typically they're very minimal. The things that you should be like focused on, it's maybe 1 or 2, maybe 3 things. But outside of that, it's like all this other stuff that we're just consumed in. And it's like, oh, I need to do this and I need to do that. And I got to have this and I got to have that. I'm going to try that. I'm going to go here. And it's like, whoa, calm down. And that's what I mean, I just literally tell people, like, when I get on like a consult call with somebody, I'm just like, I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to feel very slow. It's going to feel so much slower than you're used to going, 100,000 miles a minute in a diet. This is not that. This is a program that's going to help change your life. And that starts with just literally focusing on one thing. Like, we're just going to start here. Yeah. And so I do all the basics, right? We talk about all the basics, and it's like, we have to fill this particular, like, there's a criteria you have to meet before we can hit anywhere else. Like, if you're putting 10 on stress and you're putting like a 5 or 4 on sleep, we have some work to do before. Don't worry about your macros. Don't worry about, we're going to focus on, making sure we're consuming enough protein, but it's like, we don't need to be, oh my gosh, I was 2 over my fat. That is not important right now.
Right. And I call them kind of like, what are the biggest needle movers for you? Right. Because a lot of people want to focus on, oh my God, it's I need to eat better because I'm just craving this. But really where does that come from? And then as a coach, I'm always asking, let's analyze your day. Cravings can come from under eating overall, right? It can come from under eating protein, under eating fiber, under drinking water, but also your nutrition could look beautiful and you could be stressed as all hell or not sleeping, and it come from that. So sometimes I think a lot of people are trying to fix the wrong problem, right? So I always say, like, I always say 3 daily non-negotiables. And that's where, as a coach, I help my clients find what are the 3 biggest needle movers for you, because somebody else might have different needle movers, right? So that's where we're going to say, yes, there's 100 million things we could all work on for our health, right? But we don't have time for that. We don't have energy for that. And it's not necessary. But for you in particular, these 2 or 3 daily habits are going to move the needle for you. For example, if we get you sleeping, it's going to fix the cravings issue, right? Like, if that's the real problem. If we get you managing your stress, it'll fix that sugar addiction you think you have. So again, it's kind of like, but someone else might not have that. So I might have a new mom that's not sleeping. Like, I'm not going to push the needle on sleep because that's not where we're going to focus, right? Yeah. So I think that is the biggest thing. It's like, what are individually the needle movers for you? Because we all could work on 100 million things. It's about finding what is going to actually get you the most result from the smallest bit of effort.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that I like to do, we talk a lot about awareness, because I feel like a lot of women come to us and they're living in their subconscious life so much that they're not even aware about what they're doing. And a lot of the behaviors that we're talking about, whether it's like, you find yourself at the bottom of a bag of chips or a roll of Oreos or whatever that is, it's just like, we just kind of shut down and we're just like, okay, we're just like mindlessly doing things because that's what I have capacity for in this moment. A lot of that nervous system regulation that you're talking about. So we talk a lot about that awareness piece. And it's interesting because as you're talking, it's like, man, I know, like, when I just start eating out of a bag, like chips out of a bag, I already know something isn't right? The moment I recognize, like, oh, I'm doing this behavior, something is not correct. Normally, I take my stuff out, I get my little serving, I have little cups, and I just put a serving in a cup, and I move on with my day. But the moment I just whip out that bag and start going it down, it's like, red flag, what's going on? Right? And then it becomes a matter of, why? Without the guilt, without the shame, without the whatever, like, it's like, ask yourself, what is actually happening here? Why am I choosing this behavior right now? Because it's not because you're a failure or you're worthless or you're a piece of crap or you just have no willpower. I was just going to say no willpower. It's bigger than that. And then it's just a matter of giving yourself some grace and patience to figure that piece of yourself out.
Yeah. And I think that's where a lot of people need the guidance, because it is a higher level. I think you and I as a coach, you forget what you know. Right. And I think that's a very hard thing for anyone else to conceptualize or even then work through. So I like to tell people, like, it's my goal to teach you how to speak the language of your metabolism, because your metabolism, I promise you, is constantly speaking to you. Yep. It's just you have not been able to understand the messages. It's like coming in through, like, a foreign language. When you learn how to speak metabolism, life becomes like easy, like literal with ease. You can manage your weight and your eating behaviors because you will understand when your body is giving you that cue. Like, this is one of my favorite things to see in my clients, like, as they progress, where it's like, I need to pull back on my workouts now because I noticed that, I'm not looking forward to them, or my cravings are this. And I'm like, because now they know to tune in, versus when some people are like, oh, I'm just not motivated. I need something to motivate me. I need to, and I'm like, that's not it. Right. So it's a beautiful thing when you can learn how to read the signals that your body has been giving you all along, because once you figure it out in hindsight, you're gonna be like, oh snap. Yep. It was telling me that for a long time. And I was just not listening.
Yeah. And like I said, I think some of us are just, that stress piece is so relevant, especially nowadays where we're nonstop. You talk about kids in sports. I have kids in sports. It's like nonstop. It's just, we never stop. We never slow down. We never pause. And it's like, just pause for a second, just chill out and breathe. Like that's like a huge thing.
I promise you that'll make I tell you, like, this will make you so uncomfortable. Like literally put your phone away and sit in silence. It's like, oh my God, then I have thoughts and I have this. And it's like, that is probably the most uncomfortable thing. That and trying to chew your food 20 times, I think is like, I'm like, that'd be the hardest thing you ever do. Like, you're going to realize that you chew chomp down. Like, you know, yeah.
Yeah. And then no nutrients get absorbed. And then you're like, why do I have diarrhea? Why?
Bloating. Yeah.
Why did I wake up 14 pounds heavier today? Well, your food is, there's a whole meatball going across your digestive tract right now. Like that could be a part of it. I don't know.
That could be it. Yeah. It's hilarious.
Awesome. I still have like notes that we could riff on forever. But I don't want to make this super long. So is there anything else you wanted to put out there, touch on, or talk about before we wrap it up?
I mean, there's, like you said, there's so much, but I think this was a really good, like, everything kind of stayed the course in terms of, you know, hopefully people can benefit, and maybe we can do this again and we'll talk different topics. I mean, a couple of things, I mean, I just am real passionate about too, is like we just kind of touched on the end, like meal hygiene. People are not paying attention to that because even that has to do with, you know, your hunger and your fullness. Like, so there's so many little nuances. Yeah, exactly.
Scrolling,
watching the TV, checking your email, feeling like you have to work through lunch, which, you know, work is so busy. I'm like, if you took even 10 minutes of undistracted time, like the world would survive. Like, I think a lot of us put these implications on ourselves too. So that's why something that's huge for me to work on with my clients is like boundary setting. And because so many women, like you said, they truly want to work on themselves and have no capacity to, because we're living these lives of like pile on more. So the first thing I do with my clients, honestly, is we gotta clear the space. We gotta open up capacity, right? And so that means pulling back on some things. It's not about adding to your list. So that's like a whole nother topic of conversation. But I do think for anyone willing, because this is a common theme that you're listening and taking in all this advice, but I don't have time for that, but I can't do that. And I'm like, if you don't, you don't. And then we need to make the time, right? Because, you know, it's that cliche saying we all have the same 24 hours, but it's not about how many hours are in the day. It's about how many hours you have available to put towards yourself. And like we've just touched on, it doesn't have to be big, heavy things. It can be small things, like you're eating anyway, right? You're like, I always tell people, I'm just here to make you get better bang for your buck with like the things that you're already doing. And so I think that is, you know, if I could pull this all back to anything, the first thing you need to do is, like take a look at boundaries, take a look at what you're committed to, what you're available to. And then, you know, we got to make room for the new, essentially.
Yeah. That's the hard conversation. I think that might be one of the hardest is to tell clients, pause. Like we need to pull back somewhere. I have a client that literally sits 12 hours a day at a desk. She gets up to go pee and comes back and sits. I said, this isn't okay. Like this is, well, I go from meeting to meeting I said, put that bad boy on, put your little Zoom camera off and go upstairs outside of that room and breathe somewhere. Like it's not okay to live that kind of life. And that's why
we're just, used to it. Right.
Yeah. And that's why you're having the problems that you're having.
Yeah.
So it's like we got to
embracing a whole different lifestyle when you start to look at it from that aspect instead of like the punishment of, you know, not having certain things.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. This was a great conversation. Like I said, I still have notes down here, so we could probably do this again. I would love that.
I would love to. Part two.
Part two. All right. So all of Christina's information is going to be in the show notes. You guys can go check her out, Instagram and whatnot. Highly recommend giving her follow. She's got a lot of great information in there. I was even like, oh, I like this. Oh, this is interesting. Oh, I just learned something. Like again, 8 years in and you're still like learning, right? That's the point.
Forever learning.
Forever. Yeah. So thank you again for joining me. Really appreciate your time today. And guys, check out the show notes and give her a follow. Thanks again for joining. Thanks so much for listening today. If you laughed, learned, or just felt the vibe, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Your support keeps this ass train chugging along. If you're ready to embrace the basics with the twist, follow me on social media. Links are in the show notes, and let's see the ways we can work together. All right, basics bitches, you're not just listeners, you're part of the revolution. Remember, skinny's out, basics are in, and you're looking damn good doing it. So until next time, stay basic.